essayist, humorist, author of 22 books on subjects ranging from pro football to the English language. Mr. Blount grew up in Decatur, Georgia, where his mother urged him to be sweet. Early on, he honed the observational, that's one of his titles. He honed the observational skills and the sense of irony that make him such a widely read author and speaker, notably on NPR. In fact, if you've ever read any sports journalism, ever listened to the radio, ever read Garden and Gun magazine, where he has a regular column, ever read Esquire, the New York Times, Atlanta Magazine, Inside Sports, Men's Journal, Condé Nast Traveler, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Atlanta Journal, you've probably read or heard some of Roy Blount's works. His essays, articles, stories, verses, and even drawings have appeared in 168 different periodicals, including also The New Yorker, Gourmet, Playboy, Vanity Fair, GQ, Life, TV Guide. I'm not going to read my whole 4-page introduction, but I could easily do that, and it would only cover a portion of all that he has done. His work has taken him to China, Uganda, and Iceland. He has rafted the Amazon, where he was attacked by piranha, played baseball with the Chicago Cubs, hung out with Wilt Chamberlain, Yogi Berra, Reggie Jackson, and the world's then oldest living lifeguard, though not all at once. He has covered Democratic and Republican conventions and presidential election nights. He has reported on the civil rights movement, Elvis's funeral, the Olympics, several World Series and Super Bowls, and he has interviewed Martin Luther King Jr., Willie Nelson, Ray Charles, Satchel Paige, Joe DiMaggio, Willie Mays, Loretta Lynn, and Eudora Welty. He has publicly expressed his misgivings about every president since JFK, with the exception, for some reason, of Gerald Ford. He even gets credit for my introduction. Most of it comes from his highly entertaining website. Well, all this, plus he's a cat person. I got to see pictures of Jimmy, his cat, who sits on his head, and it does not get any better than this, folks. Please welcome Roy Blount Jr.
Thank you for that introduction, Cary. It's always interesting what kind of introduction you're going to get. I was in New York. The New York Public Library has a dinner every year called the Literary Lions Dinner, where 20 authors have chosen to be literary lions, and people come in and spend money to sit at the table with authors, and it's a good cause and all. So I did it, and then after 20 years of that, or 10 years of that, the 10th anniversary Literary Lions Dinner was, there were 200 literary lions by then. So we've lost a few, but well, pretty nearly 200. And Meryl Streep once said a profound thing. I'm sure she said many profound things, but she said a profound thing to the Yale graduating class one year, which was that she said, "You're leaving college now and going out into real life, and you'll find that real life is not like college. Real life is like high school." But sometimes the literary life is more like grammar school, because in this case, before the dinner, all of us authors were lined up in the hall outside the big dining hall, like being lined up outside the lunchroom, you know, and we were lined up alphabetically, which is kind of interesting, because you don't think about where you stand, you know, how you fit in alphabetically with other authors. And it turns out that just because you're alphabetically close to another author doesn't mean you're going to get along with him or her. I was a B, of course, and I found out that I was in between Harold Bloom and Judy Bloom. I got on fine with Judy, but Harold and I just did not hit it off. And so this was happening all up and down the line. You know, people were, Jays were losing interest in other Jays and going off and finding themselves among the W's and so on and so forth. And there was a guy, you know, we were about to be sent out into the big glittery dining hall, and there was a guy there with a clipboard, you know, who was supposed to keep order and get everybody out just at exactly the right moment. And he was, first of all, he was shushing us. And you kind of hate to be shushed when you're living there. You kind of cooperate with the problem. And so, you know, so he tried not to talk. And, but people were talking, and not only talking, as I say, but getting out of line. And he could see this, and he'd be looking back, he'd be peeping into the dining hall and looking back at us and saying, "People, I can't do this if you don't get back in the So he would shuffle back in the line. And so as a B, I was, you know, pretty close to the front of the line, so he was, you know, just at the right moment, he set me out, and I walked out, and it was big, huge, dazzling room they had in the library there with all these beautifully dressed people in evening clothes, and I knew what to do. I had been coached to walk straight to my table, and I could find my head. On an occasion like that, I might well, if left to my own devices, wander around for hours trying to find where I was supposed to go. But in this case, I knew exactly where to go, and I was focusing on that. And I knew that I was going to, once I got to my table, I was going to be asked the two questions you should never ask an author. How is your book coming, and how is your book doing? But I was game for it. There was good cause, and so I headed toward my table, and I heard the voice of Barbara Walters saying, "And now, a humorist, a novelist." And I thought, oh, gosh, that's sort of cool. I only ever wrote one novel, and Barbara Walters knows that I wrote a novel. That's kind of nice. So I had a kind of spring in my step as I headed toward my table, until I heard Barbara Walters say, "And, incidentally, a very good cook." And that left me sort of nonplussed, because, you know, I have done things at night that I don't remember. I woke up once in a New Orleans hotel room and blinked and went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror, and I had this big clot of dried blood right in the middle of my forehead. And I said, well, I'm going to have to change my way of living, because you know, I remember a lot of things from last night, but for the life of me, I don't remember getting shot. Which is, especially if you're a writer, you need to remember, you know, you need to remember things like that. There's no point in getting shot if you don't know what it was like and can't use it in your work. So I was feeling kind of bad until I turned on the light and looked a little closer and realized that I had not been shot. I had just slept on my complimentary mint. I can see that it happened to all of us. But I couldn't imagine that I had cooked for Barbara Walters and forgotten about it. I mean, I thought this was the first time I'd ever seen Barbara Walters in the flesh. And boy, I'm not that good a cook. I couldn't figure out, I mean, I can cook for children and myself, basically. I'm not the kind of food that Barbara Walters is used to. I couldn't imagine why she thought I was a good cook until she finished up by saying, "Nora Ephron." Everybody applauded me, and I sat down, and we had gotten all out of order. And this happened all down to the alphabet. You know. Everybody in the hall was introduced. At one point, somebody said, "George Plimpton." Oh, it was Tony Randall took over halfway through the alphabet. He said, "George Plimpton." And this little Indian woman walked out. So, you know, you never know. Sometimes the literary recognition is not quite what it's cracked up to be. But I appreciate being here in Memphis. I've been in Memphis off and on over the years, but not in quite a while. And this is a nice room here. I thought I have these two books about words that came out over the last few years, Alphabet Juice and Alphabetter Juice. I always wanted to do a book about words, because I've always thought that words are really primarily oral. You know, obviously the written word is not just oral, but there's always an oral element to me in words. And my mother taught me how to read by sounding out the words, and also reading to me from Uncle Remus stories, which had phrases like to be shown, T-O-O-B-Y-S-H-O, and by and by, B-I-M-E-D-Y, which I thought was just a magical way of spelling the way people say by and by. So I've always been sort of prejudiced in favor of orality in language. And, okay, so this is how this book, Alphabet Juice, begins. According to scholars of linguistics, the relation between a word and its meaning is arbitrary. In proof, they point to pigs. Stephen Pinker, in his book Words and Rules, observes that pigs go oink oink in English, neuf neuf in Norwegian, and in Russian, C-H-R-J-O, C-H-R-J-O. That may look arbitrary, as if it went something like this when you're trying to decide words. English committee member number 1. What do we put down for pig noise? Member number 2, whose motives are unclear. Let's name it for my Uncle Oink. Member number 3. No, we need to capture more of that grunt, grunt. A weary groan arises. Member number 4. In Russia, he or she is shouted down. And committee chairman, people, we have to move on. All these words. Have you ever tried to spell any of the various sounds that pigs make? It isn't easy. It's damn well worth trying, but eventually you have to settle on something close. Chickens being more articulate, you'll find their noises to be pretty similar the world round. Baby chicks go peep peep in English, pio pio in Spanish, and pio pio in Japanese. And I'm not sure Pinker is playing fair with that C-H-R-J-O. It's not Russian letters. How am I supposed to know how Russian people or pigs pronounce it? Fortunately, by Googling Russian pigs go, I have obtained the input of an online chat person named Mr. Anonymous, who sounds like he knows what he is talking about. He writes, in Russian, pigs go H-R-O-O, H-R-O-O. Note that these are rolled R's, and the H is more of a HK sound, like when you try to build a hoopty. Don't try and pronounce the K, just phlegm up the H. That's not bad. Over the years and around the world, generation building upon generation, people have put much mimetic effort into the spelling of pig utterance. For that matter, grunt works for me, and I resent any insinuation that I have been programmed by random convention. Dictionaries, in their grudging way, call grunt probably imitative. You think? The word is a distinct refinement or counter-refinement of the Old English grunnaton, and although they parallel Greek G-R-Y, they get a little too technical sometimes. But anyway, that's what I think of as alphabet juice, is the intrinsic energy of language that not only conveys an abstract meaning, but connects the meaning to physical reference, and also connects language to the mouth. And the word through, for instance, you ever notice that the word through starts up here and goes all straight back through your mouth, whereas the word throttle starts out that way, but then it gets back in the vacuum. Throttle, throttle. You know, a glottal stop is like, oh no, you didn't. I'm getting married in the morning. Throttle, and then there's throw, anyway, goes into a lot of THR words in here. And I just love to get into all that, and to register the physicality of language. You know, I think that's Southern to some extent, that Southerners tend to accentuate the oral element in language. I did an anthology of Southern humor a while back, and people ask me what Southern humor is, how it's different from non-Southern. And I said it stresses the animals a lot, and also orality in the mouth and physicality. I wrote a little poem which sort of incorporates all those elements. It's a song to oysters. It goes like this. I like to eat an uncooked oyster. Nothing slicker, nothing moister. Nothing's easier on your gorge or when the time comes to the shore. But not to let it too long rest within your mouth is always best. For if your mind dwells on an oyster, nothing's slicker, nothing's moisture. I prefer my oyster fried. Then I'm sure my oysters die. I did another book called Alphabet Juice, and I got the term meta-narrative. I thought I would get it off into some serious critical terms. So I talked about meta-narrative, but I talked about it in the context of pig and possum throwing. I'll try to explain that. The meta-narrative is the cultural assumptions underlining a story. In the postmodern era, we're meant to go, yeah, right, to moral frameworks, to be radically skeptical of meta-narratives. And then I quoted something. Thinkers like Alice Kallinikos and Jürgen Habermas argue that Jean-François Lyotard's description of the postmodern world as containing an incredulity toward meta-narratives should be seen as a meta-narrative in itself. According to this view, post-structural thinkers like Lyotard criticize universal rules but postulate that postmodernity contains a universal skepticism toward meta-narratives, and this universal skepticism is in itself a contemporary meta-narrative, like a postmodern neo-romanticist meta-narrative that intends to build up a meta-critic or meta-discourse or a meta-belief holding up that Western science is just, it goes on and on and on. That would seem to cover everything. But what if, for the life of you, you can find no meta-narrative in a story? Some years back, I wrote a book about being a Southerner in the North. As I trudged from city to city, trying to induce people to buy that book, I was called upon to explain what non-Southerners regarded as characteristically Southern phenomena. In Wellesley, Massachusetts, a lady handed me a printout of this article. Headline: Man fined for tossing pig over hotel counter. Associated Press. West Point, Mississippi, December 6th. When pigs fly, indeed. Kevin Pugh, 20, of Cedar Bluff, has been fined $279 for tossing a pig over the counter at the Holladay Inn Express in West Point on November the 12th. Pugh pleaded guilty Tuesday in city court to a charge of disturbing the peace. West Point Police Lieutenant Danny McCaskill has said Pugh didn't know the employees of the hotel, and there was no evidence, here's a surprise, no evidence intoxication was involved. No one was hurt, including the pig, officers said. This was the silliest thing I've ever seen, McCaskill said. Almost every officer we had was involved because the incidents, kept happening at different hours. McCaskill said Pugh was accused of walking into the hotel and throwing the 60-pound pig over the counter. You said it was a prank, McCaskill said. Must be some redneck thing, because I haven't ever heard of anything like it. McCaskill said there have been 4 late-night incidents involving animal tossing at West Point dealerships. Twice a pig was tossed, and 2 of the incidents involved possums. All 4 of the disturbances took place between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., McCaskill said. Pugh is accused in a second animal throwing incident at a Hardee's restaurant. He has pleaded innocent to disturbing the peace in that case. The lady who handed me this article said, "Why would they do that?" I was tempted to make something up. This man undoubtedly belongs to SPOT, S-P-O-T, I could have told her. Society of Pig and Opossum Throwing. They do a lot of good things too. They raise money for new fire engines and so on, and most of the throwing is ceremonial and open to the public. They throw pigs and possums back and forth to each other, and it is something to see. Especially the catch and release action, which must be accomplished in one motion so the tossed animal will not get its bearings and bite the receiver. Hot possum, they will cry, or hot pig. Up north, I believe the game is watered down to hot potato. Which is a good indication of the difference between north and south. But some spot members, if they don't get to bed early enough, are bad to indulge on occasion in what might be seen as extracurricular pig or possum throwing. But saying that would have contributed to misunderstanding between the regions. I assured the lady that this story, to the best of my knowledge, was an isolated instance, or okay, a series of isolated instances, not amounting to a trend or custom. She wasn't satisfied. She looked at me as though she felt I was covering something up. Maybe I should have just said, y'all don't ever pay a hotel bill that way? Truth is, I was curious about the story myself, so I did some Googling. That news story, it turns out, circulated internationally. Here is the Romanian version. Port Aruncat intra-un hotel. Kevin Pugh in Varsta de 20 ani din Cedar Bluff, a primit o amenda de, I won't read the whole thing. Here is the Slovenian translation. As Pult Virgil Zavega Prasica. American Kevin Pugh, Jamaro Pakati 279 Dolarjev Kazny Sarati here. Goes on. Polisiski Naelnik, Danny McCaskill, Jeff Robidahl. Evidently, the word for possum is similar in Romanian and Slovenian, pasumi, but pig appears to be quite different from the two letters. No Kevin Pugh is listed in the Cedar Bluff area, according to information, so we may never know what motivated him in these acts. Or I should say in this act, because we don't know that he was the perpetrator of more than the one throwing. It is even possible that no possums were thrown, since you'll notice that the story says only that possums were involved. Which is not to imply that the possums were the brains behind it. I once asked Basil Clark, who organized the Possum Growers Benevolent Association in Clanton, Alabama, whether a possum was intelligent. He is if he has to be, said Clark. He'd rather just mosey along. When all is said and done, however, I wonder myself what Mr. Pugh was thinking, other than just, pig, hotel desk, hot damn. I believe we, then I get off in postmodernism again, but here's what, I have a hard time figuring that this animal throwing story has any meta-narrative at all, unless there is one possibility. I am by no means implying any sort of complicity here, but it just could be that the meta-narrative of the animal throwing is an effort to establish internationally, incredibly as far as I'm concerned, that there is a police lieutenant in West Point, Mississippi, who is not a redneck.
Not the redneck.
Danny McCaskill. So it must be some kind of redneck thing. You know, I could read you. Let's see, let me just find that. Oh, the word. I have a little piece about each letter of the alphabet. O, for instance. The last sentence in the OED's lengthy discussion of the letter O's development is this. The fancy, frequent in authors of the 16th and 17th century, that the shape of the letter O represented the rounded shape of the mouth in forming the sound, can be seen from the history of the letter to be without foundation in fact. I argue with that for a while. But you're joking, you're talking but anyway, and then I have stories in here about writing. It was I went to make a speech some years ago in western Pennsylvania, and the guy picked me up at the airport, and drove me to the place where I was at to make the speech. We were driving along, it's out somewhere in the woods, some kind of encampment, I don't know. But we were driving along, and he said, we're driving right near Gettysburg right now. And I said to myself, that doesn't seem right. I don't think Gettysburg's around here. And he said, and you know, they spent the winter there and just wrapped didn't have any shoes, just wrapped their feet up in rags. And we complained today. And I realized, oh, he had it confused with Valley Forge. Went along for a while and I saw a sign in front of a house that said Barb's, B-A-R-B, Barb's Fine Pies. And I said, oh, they sell pies out of their houses here? They said, yeah, there are a lot of people around here that sell pies. And that woman there has got a sells beautiful pies. She sells these lemon meringue pies, and the meringue alone, it's about that thick. He said it's as big as a chef's hat. And I thought, well, you know, that's not very much meringue on a pie that can be compared to a toque. And so we went along, and then he started talking about his wife, and he said, you know, I made her a Valentine. I cut out a heart, and then I bent a coat hanger into an arrow, and I ran that heart right through the middle of that arrow. I thought, that's an odd sort of way to put it. I guess you could say he ran the heart through the arrow rather than the other way around. And he said, yeah, she was a lot smarter than I was in school. You know. In fact, she was a hoo-hoo. And I said, I'm sorry? A hoo-hoo? What's a hoo-hoo? And he said, you know, hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoos in American colleges. Never met anybody who was dyslexic and whose dyslexia extended as far as pie. I was always, in first grade, I was always a little dyslexic myself. I always got the letters backwards and things, and I always thought that gave me a little twist that helped me focus on words a little harder. Anyway, but then I went on and did a second word book called Alpha. Well, that's the second one. Well, the first word book has, well, I'll just tell you. There's a lot of stories in here about writing I have done. And the differences between a little word, how a difference between one little word can make a big difference. I wrote a story with Wilt Chamberlain some years ago when I was at Sports Illustrated. They assigned me to go out to Bel Air, California to write a story with Wilt Chamberlain. He was announcing his retirement as a player in basketball. And Wilt Chamberlain was a huge man. I don't know, he died a few years ago, but he was supposedly 7 feet tall, but I think a little taller than that. And he had little narrow ankles, and he just got bigger and bigger and bigger as he went up. Once I was in the elevator with him, and I turned to answer something he asked me, and I realized I was looking at his elbow. It seemed like there was just as much of Wilt above my eye level as was below. But we worked together fine. I don't want to disillusion you about athletes in general, but some of them, they're not all very literary. Pete Rose never used to play for the Cincinnati Reds. For some reason, somebody asked him how many books he had ever read. And he gave that question some due consideration and said, finally, I don't think I've ever read a book. And they said, Pete, you've written two. I'm not reading them either. But Wilt, I don't know, Wilt is not only a big man, but he had this sort of gigantic, mythic reputation. For instance, he wrote a memoir in which he alleged that he had slept with 20,000 women. A friend of mine was the editor of that book, and after the manuscript came in, he called Wilt up and said, well, we're doing the math here. On a day-to-day basis, and Wilt said, yeah, well, I understand, I really, it sounds that way, but there was this one big birthday party. Anyway, what really impressed me would be, apparently he broke up with 20,000. Anyway, but we got along fine. And he was, some people, even some people who are good talkers, don't speak in prose. You know, they talk, they sound good, but a lot of it is his gestures and the intonations and everything. But Wilt spoke quite, you know, you could write down what he said and it would get on the page. And I just had to fiddle with it a little bit. And it worked out fine. We got along fine. Unfortunately, he had done a story like this and has told the story for Sports Illustrated earlier in his basketball career, and he had felt misrepresented by the headline. And so he had, part of the deal was that he had to approve not only every word in the body of the story, but every word in the headlines. So, and he, you know, it was this huge, you know, the ceilings were much higher than this. It was this house up in Bel Air, up in the hills, and it was just tall enough for him to live in it. And it had this odd feature of interior decorating that I've never seen anywhere else, which was wolf muzzles. Apparently his decorator had gotten a hold somehow of a truckload of these off of wolves. I'm sure they were roadkill wolves or something, I don't know. But he had wolf muzzle upholstery and wolf muzzle carpets, and so there are all these wolf muzzles. And there are also several of his friends there who were there to keep him from being taken advantage of by me. You know, they weren't as tall as he was, but they were tall enough to be his friends, and they were sort of, you know, walking around watching me for one false move. They didn't want Wilt to be misrepresented again. So I was there, and in those days, this was quite a while ago, we didn't have fax machines and much less computers where you just hit a button and the story would go. You had this thing that Hunter Thompson called a mojo machine, which is you hook it up to a big heavy thing, hook it up to a telephone, and you put a page of typed copy in it, and it would gradually transmit it to another mojo machine at the other end. And we were waiting for the story to come in through these machines from New York, where it was being edited. And the story came through, you know, and read the whole story, page by page, it was fine. And then the main headline came through, which was, that came through, and I passed it up to Wilt to move on. And the main headline was, quote, "My impact will be everlasting," which was fine with him. He had in fact said that word for word, and he thought it was commensurate with his stature. So that was good. But then the subhead came in slowly on the machine, and I pulled it up, and I could see that there might be a problem. So I handed it up to him. Subhead was, "A dominant force in basketball announces his retirement from the game." And Wilt read that and said, "A dominant force." And I said, well, you know, I think that the operative words there are dominant and force. And he said, "A dominant force." And his friends were already beginning to move around, and they said, "Hey, dominant? What's A dominant? What are you, dominant? You wouldn't call him A." And I said, "You apparently would like it to be the dominant?" And he said, "Yes." So, the dominant. Unfortunately, I could see that that wasn't going to fit. There's so much space. But so I called back to the office at Sports Illustrated back in New York, and we had a telephone operator there named Muriel, who was a miraculous telephone operator. She was like a White House. I mean, the White House has these people who can just track people down somehow and find them and tap and get them into the phone conversation somehow or another, wherever they are. And Muriel was not only really good, she knew she was really good and didn't take any guff off of anybody. We had a kind of imperious French managing editor named Andre Leigh, who had been Charles de Gaulle's information officer during World War II. And Leigh one time slammed the phone down, and his phone, and it rang immediately. He picked it up, and it was Muriel. And Muriel said, Andrew, if everyone in the building whanged his receiver, I would have to have brain surgery. He never whanged his receiver again. But anyway, so Muriel found the editor I had to talk to about this headline, but she found him where I was afraid she would find him, which was in a Chinese restaurant called the Holladay, which had two, not a very good Chinese restaurant, but it had two features that recommended it to us. One was that it was right around the corner from the Time and Life building where Sports Illustrated was, and it also had a policy that every fourth drink was free. Which meant, if you think about it, it didn't hardly pay not to have 8. And when we reached this editor, he picked up the phone and said, I'm here with Wilt, and everything's fine with the story, but the subhead, Wilt doesn't want to be A dominant for us, he wants to be the dominant. And the editor answered me in a way that was all the more frustrating because it almost sounded like human speech. But it was like, I don't know. I think the A-Z, I don't know. And meanwhile, Wilt's friends were moving around, you know, saying things like, A-Dom, the man, I can't see you come into a man's home and call him A-Dom. You know? Wolf muzzles were bristling up on me. Sitting on. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't get in. Every now and then a Chinese waiter would somehow a voice would come in and say, who you want? You know? So I couldn't get anywhere. And I said, well, you're going to have to talk to this editor. So I handed the phone up to him and said, yeah, Will Chairman here. No, but the problem is, I know, dominant, of course, but the difference between A dominant and, well, I know, of course. And to my astonishment, I was hearing Wilt Mall. And he finally agreed to the headline. He handed me the phone back, and I hung it up, and he said, who the hell is Muriel? Always hope that Muriel will kick in when I'm writing and help me out. So anyway, I did a show in New York one time, and well, I just got up and talked for 2 hours, an hour and a half, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the New York theater. So you know, you see singers and musicians on the subway, right? You know, sort of break in like that. So I thought maybe I would break in my act on the subway. So I went to the subways and got up and was about to do a monologue when I noticed that there was a couple there who were awfully striking because they had black leather on all over, and yet you had the sense that they were covered with lizard tattoos, because you could see the tail of a lizard disappearing in here and the head of a lizard coming out here. But they were having a kind of conversation that couples who aren't teaming with lizards. He was saying to her, you don't share your life with me. And she said, what do you mean? What don't I say? What don't I tell you about? He said, I tell you about everything, but I have to hear about what you do from other people. And she said, what are you talking about? What have I not told you about? And he said, well, how about Francesco? And she said, oh, well, I thought you knew about Francesco. He was just a really nice man. One of the first people I met when I came to town. And the guy said, see, that's exactly what I mean. I pick a name out of the air. Who the hell is Francesco? So I couldn't compete with that. So I just went over there and did my show, but I stopped about halfway through and threw the floor open for questions. Because I think a lot of plays can be improved by questions from the audience. For instance, Othello. If there were questions from after a couple of acts, a tragedy might be averted. So I did that. So I thought perhaps this is a good moment in the to throw the floor open for questions over anything that we have covered or not covered. Anybody got any questions? Now's the time.
Well, I've never written about Gerald Ford.
Well, Gerald Ford didn't last very long, and somehow or another I didn't have any place to write about it. I didn't have a column or anything for no reason. I'd love to complain about Gerald Ford too. For most presidents, I have had a column or some kind of thing that I could do. I've been registered as a sort of columnist, which is, I don't think Gerald Ford minded one way or the other. Yeah.
How was the wait experience?
Wait, don't tell me experience is you go to, usually to Chicago, but sometimes to other cities, and on Thursday night, they tape it in front of a live audience, and it's fun to do. It's been going on now since for about 14 years, I guess, and it took a while for it to catch on. But it's the most popular and unfortunately among the least lucrative things I've ever been involved in. But it's great. We go over there, and it's sort of like basketball in a way, in the sense that Peter Sagal brings the ball down the court, and somebody will take a shot, and then because it's edited later, you can sort of just say something stupid, keep the ball in the air, and then maybe somebody will think of something funny. And so we've had all kinds of distinct. We used to just have NPR people as our guests, but then we had Obama back when he was a senator, and he came on and said, at one point he said he was surprised to find when he got into the Senate that every senator had a little desk, like in grammar school, and the senators over the centuries had carved their names into the desk. And I said, "What are you supposed to do?" And he said, "Well, I thought as the only African American senator, I might spray paint." So it's fun. Yeah.
What's Garrison Keillor really like?
I don't know. I've only known him for 30 years. So Garrison Keillor is very tall, and he talks about being a shy person, and he still is sort of a shy person. He'll be very nice to your sister, things like that. But if he comes over, he's a much better host than he is a guest. He's just one time he'll say things like, "We don't mingle with him." So he's don't invite him to a cocktail party with a lot of trendy guests, and have him come over and see your sister. He's a good, solid folks if it's just you and your sister. Yeah.
I was wondering, you've written a lot of books, and I was wondering, with new technology coming all the time, do you find it easier to write a book or harder to write a book, and how does your method, has your method changed at all since computers came out, or is it the same as it always has?
The question is, now with new technology coming out all the time, do I find it harder or easier to write a book, and is my method changed with the new technology? I'm unable physically to operate the old typewriter, the old standard typewriter that I wrote several, not one finger. His head taught me to touch type in 8th grade, so I was a touch type, but it's hard to push those keys down. So I've been writing on a computer now for a number. I never could write on an electric typewriter because I would put my fingers down on the keys. So I skipped electric typewriter. But it's certainly, but when I was writing on a typewriter, I did more drafts, and you'd have to retype the sentence. Whereas writing on the computer is sort of like finger painting. You just sort of do anything you want to. So it is great when you get a book written. It's on your machine, You can just hit a button and it goes to the publisher. And that's much better than mailing it off. So there's a lot to be said for that, but I don't tweet. I don't do Facebook. I never have gotten involved in all that stuff. Now, more and more, the book seems like some kind of incidental thing where people want to meet the author. You know, and to me, it's all about the book, not the author. And you know, people want to go to your Facebook page and chat with you, and I'm not that great at chatting. So I don't do all that. I may have to start doing it. So, and the whole book business is in really terrible shape. People steal them. One thing, you know, you can go to these sites where you can sign up. I'm not going to tell you the name of it. You probably know it. Or you can just sign up for $60 and you can get any book that's been scanned and stolen for free, along with movies and TV shows and music. And I saw a T-shirt in New Orleans in the window recently. It said, a picture of a motorcycle, and it said, "Ride it like you stole it." So I thought it was so cool. And I think if you're going to steal books, you ought to read them like you stole them. So the wind in your hair scares to death. I almost would like readers like that. But, anyway, so that's a problem. You know, it just what books consist of anymore is, you know, e-books are just different, I think. And it's getting, you know, Amazon wants every book e-book to sell for $9.99 because Amazon will buy books from the publisher for $12.99 and sell them for $9.99 so that they can sell their Kindles. You know, it's all about selling the device, not the books. And and then meanwhile, Amazon's sort of taking over publishing. They're publishing their own books, and publishers are running scared. And so it's harder and harder to get people to publish because it just kind of gets tossed out there. And bookstores are folding, and bookstores were always such a. I mean, you write a book. It's in a store, and then you can go there and you can sign it and you can talk to people about it. But if there are no bookstores, it all just becomes Facebook and in some ways that's more efficient. But I love to browse in a bookstore. You know, I mean, you can browse online, but not the same way. You have to be sort of looking. You can find what you're looking for online, but you don't find what you're not looking for. That's what I always wanted to find. So I don't know. It's keeps evolving, and I keep getting older, and I think people in general now spend so much of their time trying to figure out how to use the new operating system on their new device that instead of learning from a book, they're learning about how to read the book not from the manual. It doesn't say the manual anymore. But learning how to, and I really get tired of learning how to use new devices. I don't want to use new devices. I like my iPad. I got an iPhone. I got a little thin computer. A lot to be said for all that. But after a while, you wonder if it's not all about the devices instead of the books. Anybody else? Yeah.
When did you first decide to write about the Mars Brothers?
I wrote this little book called about Duck Soup. It's always one of my favorite movies. And there was an editor who was going to have a series of books about where an author picked something he or she really wanted to write about, and they wrote about it. Just one subject. And so I said, well, I'll write about Duck Soup. Okay. I spent a lot of time watching Duck Soup over and over and slowing it down and using my computer to stop it and back it up. And the great thing was I got this big monitor, and I would have the movie up over here, you know, from the DVD movie. I could watch the movie and write about it at the same time. So at any rate, I've just always loved that. So when I first went up to New York, I grew up in Cary, Georgia, and I won a scholarship to Vanderbilt, the Grantland Rice Sports Writing School. which had summer jobs in New York at the Morning Telegraph, the racing business out there. But, and I would go to this old theater called the Theater and see old movies. And one of the first ones I saw was Duck Soup, which is just a crazy movie. There's no, you know, social message or anything. And it doesn't, most of Marx Brothers movies have a sappy love story that you have to suffer through for the sake of comedy. Duck Soup is nobody's in love with anybody, and it's just all bang, 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 bang. And I just always fancied it, and so I watched it over and over, and I read up on the Marx Brothers and just dug up. I like to do things like that. Just take a topic and just see what I can find, toss it all together, and so that's what I like to write. I love movies sometimes. I don't know. It was just an opportunity where a publisher wanted me to do something, and I jumped on it. Anybody else? Well, let me read you this thing. I don't know which book I have it queued up. This goes back to the orality of language. Eating is like reading and writing. Eating goes hand in hand with talking. Folks I grew up with talked while they ate about what they were eating. When several sides and generations of the family of such folks sat down together around the table with 10 or 12 generous platters of food in front of them, they sounded like this. And thus to thy service, amen. Pitch in. Oh, I don't know where to start first. Big Mama has outdone herself tonight. Well, I just hope y'all can enjoy it. I believe I could eat a horse. But you look at them tomatoes. Woo, don't they look good? Now, Tatum, slow down. You let that child enjoy himself. Well, you think we didn't feed him at home? He didn't get any snap beans. Lord, pass that child some snap beans. Lila, how about you over there? You need something more. Butter beans? Man, no. I'm working in this corn. Come on, just a dab. Well, you taught me to do it. Awful early to be getting this good of corn. Leigh, would you send that okra back around? Look at me, just putting it away. I'm eating like a field hand. A little more tea to wash it down. These greens. Anybody want anything? Well, I will have one more helping of that squash if nobody minds. It's so good. Little cornbread to stop that juice. One more mouthful of ham, then I do have to stop. Sure enough. Look at all that chicken left. Have a little more there, Farrell. Well, where would you put it? And just a spoonful of that gravy to put on my peas. Farrell, we didn't raise you to put gravy on your peas. See, you let that child eat the way he likes it. More rolls, anybody? I think this is all I can hold. You better eat some more of this good chicken. No, I got to save room for pie. There's pie? All this and pie? Now, Needy, you know good and well we wouldn't let y'all go back home and tell folks we didn't serve you any pie. Look at that pie. What is in this pie? This pie is so good. How do you get your crust to do like this, Big Mama? My crust won't do like this to save my life. Oh, I've had your crust. Your crust does fine. Well, I have eaten myself sick. Wasn't that good? I don't think I could touch another bite. I'm about to pop. Yes, Lord. Them tomatoes are especially good. Got plenty more now I could slice right up. No, I'd die.